All right, people, it's Dr. Laura Dessauer, the creativity queen, and today we're getting real. Uh, we're going to be talking about the inner critic and the inner critic committee. And some of you know this, some of you may not have heard this information, so we'll sit with all who show up here to this video. So let's take a moment to just kind of hear some inner voices, right? And we're not talking about psychotic voices. We're talking about the self-talk that we talk internally when we're doing things. Now, let's say you, I don't know, just really did something amazing at work and you're like, yeah, I nailed that, right? Like the internal voice might be like, yeah, awesome, way to go, right? And all of a sudden people around you are like, yeah, we're noticing, that's fantastic. And then something inside of you might be like, well, maybe that's not enough. Or, gosh, I'm going to have to do even better next time. And just noticing if that voice sometimes pops up, or maybe the voice that's always looking for things to go wrong. Like, oh, I nailed that, but I'm waiting for the other shoe to fall, or something else is going to happen. That voice sometimes ends up popping in there and saying, don't get too full of yourself, right? And if you think about that voice, or the voices that run inside of your head throughout the day, because we all have them talking to ourselves, right? Are they uplifting voices, or are they the critic? And if they're the critic, do they sound like somebody you know? Does it sound like a parent? Does it sound like a spouse? Does it sound like a sibling? Does it sound like a teacher? Are those things that you're telling yourself when all of a sudden you're feeling like, you could have done it better, don't screw this up, you always screw this up, gosh, you never get it right? Are those your words, original words to you, or are they the words of what you may have heard, been programmed as a child, right? Because the adults in your life, they didn't know any better, because if they knew better, they wouldn't be doing that. They probably didn't get positive self-talk. They probably didn't have adults encouraging them. So they fed you the same thing that they were fed, which were these negative, critical things, probably thinking that they were doing their parenting job, because I know most parents aren't like, oh, I want to say negative, disparaging things to my child so that they end up self-loathing and hating themselves as they get older. Most people don't feel that way. They feel like, if I don't tell them this, then they're going to get too full of themselves, or they won't do better. So I think a lot of adults were trying to help you as a child by giving you critical feedback. Now, is that helpful? Feedback's helpful, but criticism, not so much, right? Feedback is like, I noticed you did a lot of hard work. And here's some ways to correct maybe some of the things that you did not to your best ability. And I can see that you're really committed to working through this. So kind of like those Oreo cookie sandwiches of like, hey, I'm acknowledging your effort. I'm praising you for the work that you put in. Here's the feedback of how you can improve this. And hey, I'm acknowledging the work and the effort as well, right? So it's a little Oreo cookie or a sandwich. Now, most of us didn't get that feedback, and most of us probably aren't giving feedback that way as well. If you are a parent, think about how you do things. Are you doing criticism, problem solving, or are you stopping and validating, then offering the feedback, and then also validating and acknowledging? It's a big shift. And in your own life, are you in this internal cycle of then criticizing? Are you recognizing, hey, I put in effort. Good job, you showed up. You adulted. You put your pants on today. Yay, you. Things are hard, right? Or are you just kind of beating yourself with these critical internal voices that don't even belong to you? So how do you stop your own internal negative criticisms that don't even belong to you, right? Well, there's a couple things, and you can bring art into this practice. You can start to create characters that represent these internal voices. So you could draw, get a piece of paper, you could use markers or pencils, and create the characters of who's on this committee of negativity? Who's in your brain running this show when it comes to criticisms? And there's a whole bunch of flavors. If you really think about the different critical parts of yourself, there's a lot of flavors. I mean, I have one that just like when its buttons get pushed too far, it shows up, and I call it nutters, right? And nutters is just like, don't be doing that anymore. Or I have the one that's just like the flogging one that's just like, keep going, right? We all have these internal voices that were passed down by other people, and we get to work on how we choose to handle them. Now, what I noticed about my internal voices and those people that I work with, the critics often are attempting to keep us safe, right? That was what our adults who taught us these lessons often thought they were doing, right? If I tell you, yell at you, whatever, berate you, I'm going to keep you in line. I'm going to keep you like contained. You're going to learn your lesson, right? They're going to keep us safe. And in some ways, we internalize this belief that if we criticize ourselves, we're negative and talking negative, we're going to keep ourselves safe. Right? But that doesn't make any sense. That's nuts, right? Like, how's that keep me safe? It keeps me playing small, keeps me kind of hiding and ducking. I mean, does that really do anything to you internally or externally, rather than just, worrying about when the next thing is going to happen to set off the external voices or the internal voices, right? Like somebody's going to get mad at me, and then I'm going to berate myself because they didn't like the way I handled it, and I'm going to punish myself, and they're going to punish me. And yeah, that can be a response. So this belief of like keeping you safe by punishing you or shutting things down so that you don't take the risks, you don't start to go soft, right? Because that was often the adults' belief. I don't want you to go soft. I have to keep you hard. I know back in my generation, that was it. There wasn't room for softness. But the softness is the way through. The softness is the way through. The softening to, yeah, you messed up on that one. And that really, really hurts. And telling those internal voices, those internal parts, I see you, right? I get it. That feels bad. And rather than having the critics pop in and saying, do better, holding that space for those internal parts that felt like, you know what, that was really challenging, and I get that, and I'm present for you. I'm hearing it, so you can re-parentify yourself, right? You can do the do-over in your life to give yourself what you didn't get in your childhood, but also to respond differently when things arise, so that you're not going into these default critical voices and patterns, right? Because what happens when you're the critic to yourself and you're angry because you did something wrong and you're flogging yourself and you're talking down negative, and then all of a sudden, what are you doing? You're eating like a pint of ice cream, like, and then you're feeling crappy, and then your voice is activated. See, look at you. You got to now not eat, as much tomorrow. You're going to gain weight, blah, 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 right? And then the cycle happens. And you just start to get into the snowball of like, not good enough, I'm not doing it right enough. But whoa, voices, hey, thank you. Thanks for trying to keep me safe. Thank you. Okay. You don't make any sense, but I appreciate you. You kind of are like the gatekeepers in that you're letting me know something is not working for me. Now let me soften. What's going on here? What am I really wanting or needing? This feels sad. This feels painful. What's the internal voice need to say? Those voices that are compassionate, not the critic, because we have compassionate voices. We do have those as well. And can we have them step in? You're doing a good job. It's enough. You're lovable. Wholly lovable. There's nothing more you need to do. So play with your parts, literally draw the critics out or make them out of model clay. Make them into little Play-Doh dumplings and kind of see what they look like, because you take the power out of them when you externalize them. I guarantee it. That voice inside of your head that always shows up, that sounds like your mother. Once you put it out there and it has a form, you start to laugh and maybe you name it and you're like, oh my gosh, there it goes again. And then you can also create these parts that are the nurturing parts, maybe the wise parts or the adult parts or whatever parts that's in your life, the goddess or the part of you that feels like the fool, right? These parts. And you can create them as well and play around with them. And if you make them out of little model magic or Play-Doh, you can move them around, right? Hey, critical part, there you are, chomping at the bit. I see you. Let's move you way over here. And let's bring in this goddess part, this part that feels like, has all the wisdom of the world. And she's going to take over for a while. Hey, what is she going to say that I need to hear right now? So play with this. And if anything, if you don't do the art, that's all right. But see if you can become aware of the voices, the critical voices that don't belong to you, that belong to other people. And see then if you can drop into that softness. There's the breath. Take a breath. Drop into the softness. And see if you can bring in other parts that maybe can hold this space for you. I hope you found this to be helpful. I know this really works wonders for me when I remember to use it. We are so human. And until next time, take care of yourself. Thanks.